joining another episode of Speaking Legally with Royce Russell Esquire and Pichardo Esquire, where the legal meets the cultural. We're excited to be with you today to talk about some real hot button topics that are happening in real time in the world. So before we officially start the show, I'll let our two co-hosts just introduce themselves again. For those of you that are viewing for the first time, I want you to meet them and know a little bit about what they do. So we're going to give them a 1-minute intro. We'll start with you, Ed, and it's great to have you on the show. We missed you last week, and we'll continue to keep your family in our prayers. So over to you, Ed.
Well, my name is Edward Pichardo. I'm an attorney here in New York City. Welcome to our show. Honored to have you as an audience member, and I hope you find the topics interesting and enriching.
Thank you, Ed. And now over to you, Mr. Russell.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming back and viewing us one more time. If you're a first-time viewer, hopefully you're a long-time viewer. I'm Royce Russell, author of Cardiac Arrest, a tactical guide on how to handle an unlawful police encounter and how appropriate for today's topic when we know that it's streaming live and all across the world and even overseas. This excessive force caught on tape. And I know we're going to dive into it. So put on your swim trunks.
Well, definitely. It's going to be a hot show today. And you mentioned your book, Cardiac Arrest. And I want to just start the conversation with, in your book, you take time to identify the various kind of cops. It's something that has caused a lot of discussion when you do your live workshops and presentation. And by the way, if you don't have a copy of Cardiac Arrest, you can find it at cardiacarrestbook.net. And I want to dive into the kind of cops. When you talk about knowing your audience, before we even show the clip of what the world is viewing, how would you describe this to those who haven't read the book and might not know the references that we'll be making in today's show?
First, I have to stand up because I have a very special shirt on, right? And I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to see it. It's visionary, right? And now, I don't proclaim to be a visionary, but I am somewhat of a historian. And following the history of how the NYPD and law enforcement in general, whether here or in Alabama, deal with people of color, we know there's certain things that's going to come out of it, right? And so one of the first things that we need to know to empower ourselves, because that's what we're really talking about. We're talking about empowering ourselves, whether it's legal, meeting the cultural, whether we're talking culturally and how to navigate, how to progress as people. We're talking about empowering ourselves. So one of the first things you need to do to empower yourself is to know, one, you may not be the problem. And two, as we have said so briefly, but we said over and over again, know your audience. Know who is speaking to you and who you are speaking to. So I often say when I do the workshops, as you talked about, Dr. Grant and Ed, as you participate in the workshops, I've categorized police, or at least 4 types of police, right? It's a broad brush, no two ways about it, but it's based upon my experience and it's based upon my vision of how I see it. And so when we analyze what took place in this tape, in this excessive force caught on tape, I got to look at who's the audience. And so is this an issue where there's a quarter cop? And we define quarter cop in cardiac arrest as a police officer who's issuing tickets to meet a certain quota, de facto quota, so they can get promoted within the police department. I would say that I don't think so. It's not a quarter cop situation. Is it a prejudice cop situation? Well, usually, maybe naively, we look at prejudice from a black and white standpoint. This person seems to be of a Latino descent, which to me is part of the African diaspora. So therefore, does it really fit? Does the cube really fit? Is it really a Rubik's Cube? It might be a force fit there. Is this a classic cop that is reacting based upon class? Maybe you're of a higher social economic than he is. So therefore, he wants to abuse you. Or you are of lower economics, so therefore he wants to abuse you. And last, what I call is the power police. And the power police is someone that just shouldn't be a police officer. doesn't have the mental wherewithal, no matter how much training you go through, no how much retraining, they are who they are. He is who he is. She is who she is. And therefore, they don't deserve to have the power, and they can't use discretion in an appropriate way. And therefore, that turns into abuse and excessive force. So if I had to paint this one, I would use brush number 4, red color, stay within the lines, and say this is a power police officer who doesn't know how to use his power. And I think his history speaks to that. So
and if I may, with respect to the prejudice prong, you mentioned people normally looking at it from a black-white perspective and saying, well, if I'm a person of color and the officer is of color, then, it kind of possibly takes it out of that realm. But keep in mind, you also have officers of color who operate strictly based on racist stereotypes and can be just as prejudicial in the way they carry out their duties as what you would think how a white officer would behave. So that's something to keep in mind. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about you may have a cop of color who will use a racial epithet or behave in a discriminatory manner. And, certainly within that context, you can apply that to an officer of color. Certainly, I think
that's why I love you, Ed. I love you so much because you could take the game of checkers that we're talking about and you just chess. Now we talking chess, right? We went from checkers, we went from chess. We were from backgammon to acey-deucey. We just raised the stakes. So what you're talking about is implicit biases. We're talking about, self-hatred, and I know we'll get to that in another segment, but if we just took this just straight off the brush and we just said, hey, I don't know this person. I don't know that he may have these, biases or prejudices within. I just know what I see. And what I see is that you out of control, bro.
No doubt.
You out of control.
So, hold on, let me pause because we have Roland. Roland, thank you for viewing. Roland says we need officers of conscience. So, you're speaking to that, and I think that's going to get into a deeper piece of our discussion. But when we look at the video, which we're about to do, and for those who haven't seen the video, brace yourself. But we're going to play it, and then we're going to continue this discussion because there's a piece that both of you said that I want to dive back in, but I want to make sure that we give the audience context for what we're speaking about and let this video play. So hold that thought.
So while you're queuing up that video, I would say to Roland, we're going to talk about having a conscience, and we're going to talk about it from a legal perspective and a cultural perspective. And that will go into what you talk about as having police of conscience. So stay tuned and stay with us.
All right, let's see what's happening here. It's pausing. So we're on the streets of New York City. We're going to keep talking because the video I think there's a lot happening on the internet, so it's giving us a little pause there, but it'll finish playing.
Well, as the video is going through it, I mean, for those who saw it, for those who didn't see it, there's an officer who then approaches who is, I would say, is a bystander, not truly intervening, but looks like he might be admonishing the officers for their actions. And then this one officer decides to slap this individual and throw him down to the ground. Now that's outside of what we already see, which is taking place with another individual that we see right now. This particular officer leaves that arrest to approach someone else with his taser out, even though this person is not posing a threat, even though this person is not armed, and then he proceeds to it's important to hear what is being said when this takes place. And that's why this video is important, because it leads us back to cardiac arrest as far as history.
And it's playing in slow-mo. It's probably working to our benefit because you can see what's happening.
Oh, here comes a taser.
Mm-hmm. So this slow-mo is helping us to see each step of what's happening
Move the fuck back.
Now the rule is you're supposed to be 20 feet apart. That individual was more than 6 feet apart. Why did you have to taser out? Once again, power, abuse of power.
Look. He ain't even
Mhm. So we're hearing the people in the background.
He ain't even do nothing. Look.
I want you to stop it there, and I want to just stop the video in total because I think the rest of the world knows what's happened. I think what is important though, and what we hear from the audio, is that we hear the crowd yelling and screaming, "He didn't do nothing. He didn't do nothing." And once again, I'm gonna stand up one more time, and we're gonna talk about visionary, but we're really gonna talk about history, because Stacey, if you go to cardiac arrest, what do we see in chapter 2? I think chapter 2 is named, what is it named?
Know your audience. Chapter 1 is know your audience. Chapter 2 is, let me scroll. I didn't do nothing.
I didn't do nothing. And there's a play on words because nothing is spelled, phonetically, but it goes to what I've been preaching and what I've been saying and what is historically in the interaction between police and people of our community. The line, I didn't do nothing, means nothing. We have to understand it means nothing. It's not whether you did something or not. Whatever's going to happen to you is going to happen to you because they want it to happen to you. And by you screaming, he didn't do nothing, he didn't do nothing, or I didn't do nothing, what you are doing, this is where the legal kicks in. This is where, we have to have some, what we call chess player rules, as Ed brings up. This is where you have to say, is it more important for me to yell, he didn't do nothing? Or is it more important to let the video play so the lawyer can get other information that's going on? We don't know if Garcia is calling him some derogatory name or is saying, this is what you get, you black, whatever. We can't hear that because someone is yelling, he didn't do nothing. Now, I know there's somebody out there saying, hey man, you're being a little too critical. And I would say to you, it's the details. It's all about the details. It's all about being able to say, look at the young man. He wasn't saying anything. We can see that, because we don't know what fictional story Garcia is going to come up with when he says that maybe the individual was saying something to him. And I'm putting it out there, forecasting it so we could strike it for a defense for him. So we know that didn't happen. So he can't even use it. But
and I just want to, and I just want to say, I just want to commend the individual who recorded this incident, because many times we know that these incidents do not get recorded and they occur, in the darkness, and they're not really supposed to, right? Because it's right now the NYPD is supposed to have a recorder on during the time of these incidents. Okay, but we both know that sometimes that doesn't happen or something happens to that recording. So it's incumbent upon citizens to, take that noble step and risk themselves. Because, the good thing here was that the recorder, the person recording the incident didn't become that the bystanders rather didn't become the focus.
I think that's definitely important. As you said, the bystander didn't become the target, which often happens, right? The other person becomes the target. But when you take that and you interplay with knowing your audience, right? If you notice police officer doesn't know how to use power, you as the recorder has to take even more precaution on how you proceed to record it, to video it, so you preserve it for the advocate that is there or will be there in the future. I think that's a great point, but we got to understand that, yes, we do commend you for stepping forward. Stepping forward comes with risk, and knowing your audience helps you. It's not only the person that's being abused, is being victimized, but it's those that are around that person that if they know who they're dealing with, then they can act in a strategic way, not act accordingly, but act in a very strategic, detailed manner to get what I need in order to pursue this litigation.
Exactly. I
Let's
agree
go
with you 100%.
to the importance of how you record the video. Let's talk about that. What you do when you're recording a video.
Well, I mean, I recommend in cardiac arrest, and I recommend as an advocate and practicing in this area, is that you should record from a distance. You should not voice that you are recording. Well, let me take a step back. You can voice that you are recording. Maybe that may be the catalyst that stops someone from actually abusing someone else. Oftentimes, I don't think it will, but you can say that. But understanding that when you announce that, now you may become the target. So you might just want to record in silence. That means don't advertise it. And as I've been preaching, don't talk over the recording, because talking over the recording may make the lawyer or prevent the lawyer from getting particular information. And I want all the information when I litigate these cases. And I know you do too, Ed.
And certainly also, you don't want to use any sort of language or do anything or act in any way that could possibly lead to an obstruction charge, or that you're interfering with this arrest somehow, even though for the most part, those allegations are bogus and get thrown out of court later. But, certainly, we have to understand that, history has proven that some of those people who record later become victims of harassment later by the NYPD themselves for having taken the courageous stance of recording. And, culturally, I've been at scenes where, somebody Latino is getting arrested. Él no hizo nada, déjalo tranquilo. And then you hear people screaming and yell, and, it goes to your point where, you try to record silently, try to help that person gather as much evidence as they can for when it comes to time for that lawyer to really analyze this and decide whether two of the four prongs that you laid out in terms of what kind of officer we're dealing with and what the underpinnings of this this abuse of power are, because you could have, I'm sure you would agree, Royce, you could have power and prejudice at the same time if they're accompanied by conduct that supports both.
Yeah, I agree with you. One of the things, because I see time is moving on, I want to make sure that we hit a lot of points in this segment. One of the things that happened as the aftermath, as a result of this, is that the media did some due diligence, and the media revealed that this particular officer has a history of doing things. And the settlements are not like, $5,000 settlements. They are multi-thousands, they are hundreds of thousands, costing the city a pretty penny. And before we move on to our next point, which is the face of change, I just want to make sure that everybody needs to understand that whether you experience discourtesies from police officers towards you, physically, verbally, abuse, no matter how small, you need to report this, because that goes into that police officer's personnel file. And that builds a background record for when this officer trips and does this again, abuses, whatever he does that violates your rights come up again, then maybe there is some reporter out there that may do some due diligence and not focus on the victim and maybe the victim's criminal history or anything about the victim, but focus on the police officer and be able to say that this person has 12 complaints against him. Some small, some big, some in between, some we settled, some was dismissed, to show and establish that there's negligence on the police department side for not disciplining this person, not terminating this person, not retraining this person, and on the city side. That is important. And so we need to file a complaint, even if we don't want to be bothered with it later on.
I just want to make a quick point, an observation that I made a few months ago. Now, there's a difference between a CCRB, Civilian Complaint Review Board complaint, and say an internal affairs complaint, which is internally within the police department, and both aren't necessarily the same. Now, what would your brief comment be on that?
Well, look, I never go to the slave owner to ask for relief for me being a slave. I just know that that's not going to happen, right? I'm not going to say, master, water. Man, like, yo, look, keep on picking water for when you're done, right? So any internal affairs, investigation, that's not a friend to me. That's not an ally to me. I
Well,
just most recently.
but suppose my name is Royce Russell, and I say, I'm going to file a complaint against the police, and I go walk to the precinct, and they say, oh, come on in, let's get your internal report, and you don't know the difference.
Well, here it is. That's why we do speaking legally, right? So you can know the difference, right? Here it is. That's why we have cardiac arrest, right? A tactical guide on how to handle unlawful police stops. So you can know the difference, right? The difference is if it says internal, that means people within is going to take the complaint. And if you don't trust those people, then how are you going to trust them with the complaint, right? CCRB, to me, just started to get some bite, but you can skip both of those prongs and you can just call me. And then I'll guide you down the path. You don't have to hesitate. You don't have to stutter. You just dial and we'll take you there. People within the community will take you there. And Stacey,
so wait, I want to pause. I want to pause a minute because I don't want to skip over what Ed just raised. And that was the point that how do you do it? So we have an issue. We're not trying to publicly relitigate what we see happening in the video. It happened. It's going to go through the course of events that it's going to go through. But what we want folks to know in speaking legally is what are the tactical things that you can do. So we talked about one, you can video. If you see something wrong, what is our theme here in New York on the subway, you see something, say something, no matter where you are in the country or the world, if something is wrong, there's a process that you can raise to get some justice, and that is filing the complaint. Will it happen overnight? Maybe not, but we want to make sure that you're videoing in a way that it can aid your complaint when you bring it to Attorney Russell or Pichardo, so they have something that they can work with when it comes to fighting for your rights. And when you talk about CCRB, we're saying it real fast. Let's explain to everybody what that looks like. So we want to stay away from necessarily internal investigation because that might not go as far as we would like it to go. But whether you're in New York or you're anywhere across the country watching Speaking Legally, what's the step to actually go to the right place to make that complaint so that you're building up a record against someone who doesn't appreciate the very important role that they play in our communities?
Well, I'll jump in and take a quick lead. Go to chapter 9. If I can't sue, what do I do? How about that? Go to chapter 9. If I can't sue, what can I do? That's what you're speaking to, right? What you can do. And we'll round robin to Speaking Legally from episode 1. You need to have an attorney that you have a relationship with. So this way you call that attorney and say, all right, this just happened to my friend. What do I do? He may advise you or she may advise you not to go to the precinct because you may be arrested there, right? It may be such a hot button that you're putting yourself in danger. Don't go today, you can go tomorrow. But note, if you go there, it is what Ed has spoke to, an internal investigation handled by Internal Affairs Bureau that 9 times out of 10 or 10 times out of 10 will not get you the result that you want. And your story is then flipped on the corners and used as a defense as to why the police officer's judgment, movement, misconduct, abuse was justified versus going to Civilian Complaint Review Board in any state if they have it, which is an independent agency that is supposed to evaluate, but we could talk about the politics of whether they do it or not, supposed to evaluate independently the actions and then hand out some type of disciplinary consequences.
Well, clearly, right before you go, Ed, I'm just going to ask you to pause on that thought, but don't lose it because time is running when we talk about Speaking Legally, and we have a lot more to go in the episodes to come. But I just want to make sure that during this episode, we realize in this COVID-19 climate, we're seeing stuff that we talked about in episode 1 happening in real time, and the legal system. This whole incident we watched was a result of people not social distancing. And we don't know what else is going to come forward. So making sure that you're writing notes, get a copy of Cardiac Arrest. This book really is a tactical guide, things that you need to remember and know how to do so that if you have an injustice, there's a process that you're building for your case when you speak to an attorney. So we're going to let both of you share your information when we wrap up the show of how people can contact you. But we really want the listening audience to know this is not anything against the upstanding police officers that do their job, put themselves on the line,
every single day in this COVID climate, trying to make sure that we're doing what we need to do. We're trying to highlight when something goes wrong or someone shamefully doesn't respect the uniform, that you have recourse in our community on what to do and to get the right information on how you can advocate for your rights. So Ed, I'll let you finish your point and then we'll start winding down the last section of this show. Well, this is a juicy one. We have some people watching, so I also want to shout them out. Hey, Vernon. Hey, Taj. Hey, Alicia. They said, thank you, Leonard. We appreciate you being here, and share this information out. This is important. Every episode has had something to deal with the legal system. Speaking legally is how you can not just be upset, be passionate, and protest. There's place and time for all of that. But what can you actually do if you're caught in a situation where you are now dealing with the justice system? And do you have an attorney that you can call? Do you know what to do? Do you know how to record a video properly? Do you know what importance it is to create a case so that they can track and see the behavior of someone who is abusing their position as a power cop, according to the outline in cardiac arrest? So share this video if you feel it can help somebody else who might need this information or have a family member that has a touch with the law and they need to know how to take the next step. That's what the purpose and the content of this show will continue to be, with two experts who are in the community doing the work, look like you and I, and understand the cultural and the legal together. Ed?
Well, I just briefly wanted to say that the last time I looked at the New York City CCRB site, it was quite user-friendly, and if I recall, it created several avenues for you to communicate your complaint. You can get them online. They gave folks a phone number to call. Not only that, you could also report it right there on the site in writing what occurred. So, I just wanted to mention that.
One of the things I want to make sure, one of the things we mentioned before we go, and you talked about it in your comments, Stacey, is that what does the face of change look like? And I just want to spend, and we may go just a little bit over, but I want to spend a couple of seconds talking about that. And I think we want to talk about it again in our next episode. But what does the face of change? When we see this video, we've seen many advocates out there speaking, denouncing it. It's interesting now that we're in COVID times, you can't go out there and just march and protest, which I think is our 1-2 punch. When something happens, we go out and march and protest. Now we can't do that. So now we got to put pen and paper together. We have to elevate our game. We have to now play chess and not checkers. We have to seek our redress in another way. But Ed and I, we have had some heartfelt conversations about, well, who is the face of change? What does the face of change look like? How come in our community, we don't empower the professionals within our community to take on these cases within the justice system and be able to file those lawsuits and become victorious in those lawsuits and move on as a people? Why is it that we look to someone else outside of our community to do that? And I'm all for everybody being an expert and going to something that you think is going to vindicate you the most. But you can't tell me Willie Gray. You can't tell me Crump. You can't tell me Royce Russell. You can't tell me Ed Pichardo doesn't have the withstand and the wherewithal to litigate these cases that happens to us daily. Somebody told me, and I use this story over and over again, you want to know what it's like to be a slave? You want to go to the slave owner, or you want to go to the slave? You want to go to the slave because he's going to tell you what it's like to be in this position. The owner's going to tell you what it looks like from his perspective, but he's not in this position. And so when you look to have a litigator in this area, why is it that the face of change doesn't look like you and I or Stacey or someone of color who can tell this story because they live this story? Why does it look like something else? The slogan, "Buy Black." Is it just a slogan? What are we doing? And that is really the cultural speaking to the legal. And if you want to be a truth teller, let's tell the truth.
And we know that these incidents all have a civil rights movement dimension to them, whether or not sometimes even the victims themselves realize it. Most of the victims of police brutality, yes, they want some sort of financial redress for what occurred to them, but they also don't want it to happen to anyone else in their community. And so therefore it takes on a movement and change perspective to it that one has to look at when one is deciding, you know, what the face of the movement is going to be and what you want it to look like and whether you want these incidents to stop. Because believe it or not, if we continue on the same course that we've been on for the last number of years, like we mentioned before, the city is willing to pay for these officers' misconduct. That's taxpayer money. That's your money. So it's almost like the community that's getting abused is paying for its own abuse. Get it? I mean, do you see the connection here? So we got to ask ourselves, what are the wider dimensions of every one of these incidents? We know that during the hot summer of 1967, you know, many years ago, most of these riots throughout the cities, throughout the country, were precipitated by police brutality. And so, you know, and the history behind it in many communities, urban communities throughout the country. So we have to think about that when we think about who represents the individuals who become subject to this sort of abuse and what happens after that. What is the change that you want to see? What do you want that change to look like?
And now, Stacey, I know we're running out of time.
Yes.
I'm sorry, did you say something, Ed? All right, it seemed like Ed is a little frozen in time. So, I mean, and I know that we're running out of time.
Yeah, the screen stopped, unfortunately. Actually.
Okay.
No,
Well,
no worries.
I think you were saying it in Spanish. I thought that's what I heard you
Oh,
say.
yeah. I was definitely saying it in Spanish. I was saying in Spanish, ¿qué es el cambio que tú quieres para tú y tu comunidad? What is the change that you want for yourself and what for your community? That's what you need to think about.
And I would add on to that as we time out and end this episode, I would say one thing, and I'm going to read this because it is important. This was from Miami Times, February of 2019. And this is what when we speak to the face of change, this is what we're talking about. And I hope our viewers really, really take this to heart and really think about this. And it's a paragraph, it's an article about Colin Kaepernick, who's my frat brother, who to me can't do any wrong. But I read this article because it cements what we're talking about here, the face of change. And it says, fighting systematic racism is not just about protesting police when they violate Black people's rights. It's about getting banks to stop discriminating against Black people who want to start small businesses but can't get a loan. It's about standing up for an African-American employee who gets passed over for job promotions, even though they're more qualified and have worked for more years at a company than the white colleagues who gets the higher paying position. People of color, Black folk, can send a message to other Black folk as we protest hand in hand that Black attorneys are worthy to fight the fight in court on their behalf. Do we believe that we can win with one of our own? Or are we saying, and this is where I edit it, buying Black is just a slogan, that we need someone else to tell our story, someone that doesn't walk in the shoes that we walk in? And I've watched many of a video about this incident. I've watched many of an advocate in many groups talk about the obvious and talk about what we should do. But we, as lawyers, myself and Ed, we're going to step in the path of truth and say, we need to be the face of change, and let us help you be the face of change. Why are you going to anyone else? Is it politics behind church doors and dropping the brown bag when it comes down to election time? Or is it about what it should be about? Change, what this change looks like. Who is the face?
So I think that is to be continued because that is a greater discussion. And I just want to show one more thing as we close out. When we talk about change, when we talk about what's fair and what we see happening in our community versus other communities. And we lifted up the video today because it was something specific that was happening. But check out this video. I don't know if we'll be able to play it, but as we can see, these are people who are protesting, spitting on cops, pushing cops, but I don't see anyone getting arrested or beat up in this video. So these are the disparities that we're talking about when you think about what change looks like and who's representing us and how is it equitable across all lines, how police show up in our community. So there are police, I have police members that retired in my family and friends circle. So this is never an attack on them, but an attack on those who don't do it the right way and put our lives in jeopardy and who disrespect who we are as people. And that's why this show is the cultural meeting the legal. It's our opportunity to talk about what's happening in our community, the things that we can change, and we're going to continue this conversation on Speaking Legally about the face of change, because it's who you elect. Who do you put in office, from your assembly to your Congress to your judges to your district attorneys? All of that matters when you talk about how we take back an ownership of how our community is treated and respected. So I appreciate both of you and the work that you do, and for civil rights, for immigration, and for criminal defense within our community, that we have two experts that people can go to, that they can have on speed dial, that have the resources and the information to help litigate cases when it does not go in your favor, something that has happened to you that's not right. And we shouldn't bring down the litmus test because it's not the popular thing to say, but be brave enough to know that we can come to someone in our community that not only understands the cultural, but can litigate for us with the legal because of your over 25 years worth of experience as attorney. So with that, I'm going to ask you to share your information so that someone who's looking for an attorney can reach out to you and can come to you when they find an injustice like what we just saw happen, and know that there's someone who can take that case and actually evaluate how you can get justice. So I'll start with you, Ed.
Well, once again, my name is Edward Pichardo. I can be reached at 718-514-9099, or if you want to email me at edp@lawofficeofedwardpichardo.com.
Thank you, Ed, and over to you, Royce.
Look, when you're in trouble, yell my name in the middle of the street. You can find me that way. You know, it's like the cup runneth over. You know how to find me. Folks know how to find me. We here. We're doing this. We're walking the walk. We're taking the steps. If you lost and you can't find me, then that's a whole nother episode we need to talk about. You have an internet. You have a cousin. You have a brother. I'm known. I'm heard. Come to me. Let me be the face of change. Let us be the face of change. I'm not giving a number out. That's that. So we're going to end it with no number.
Well, I'll end it with your website, RoyceRussellEsquire.com. Okay, so make sure that you connect with us on Speaking Legally. Share this out. As you can see, they're both very passionate about this work. And, you know, it's unfortunate that there isn't equity across the board. It's unfortunate that there is systemized racism, but instead of just getting angry, we can take action. And action is being armed with knowledge and utilizing resources like cardiac arrest, like coming to Pichardo and Royce Russell to go over your case to see if you have a case. But remember some of the things that you learned today. If you happen to be in a situation where you're videotaping an injustice, remain quiet so that the attorney can hear everything that happened during that interaction. Don't announce that you're videotaping, because you're just inviting unnecessary attention to yourself while you're trying to capture what's going on. And then if you do, unfortunately, become a victim of one of these situations, make a complaint. Go to the CCRB, the Community Complaint, what's the rest of it?
Civilian Complaint Review.
Civilian Complaint Review Board. So you go to the CCRB, I stay in my lane. I just do what I do, which is host shows and train, but you go to CCRB and make a complaint so that it goes in the personnel file of the person who has made that infraction. It makes a difference, just like it's doing now, that the media went digging through to find out more about this officer, and they found that there was more complaints in his file. That gives an attorney like Mr. Russell or Mr. Pichardo more to lean on when they're advocating for you. And ultimately,
let me just say something. They don't have to go anywhere. They can just call on their phone. They don't have to leave the premises of their house, because once again, I want to be mindful that I don't want to put one more in harm's way than necessary. However, I will always say the first step is let someone help you. We're here to help you. Make the phone call to us. We'll help you. We'll walk. You don't have to walk that walk by yourself. We don't have to worry about having attorneys that make cameo appearances and then leave. You don't have to worry about that. I know. I've been there. St. Mary's ain't too far. New York City housing is a hop, skip, and a jump. I mean, like, come on. Ain't nothing I haven't seen dealing with this. And there's nothing that you could smoke me with when dealing with this. When you're wrong, you're wrong. When you're right, you're right. We'll fight a good fight.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Russell. And let's sign off with you, Ed, in Spanish, letting everybody know the name of the show and to join us next week, same time, same place for Speaking Legally.
Hablando legalmente cada miércoles a las 4 de la tarde. Te vemos la próxima vez.
Gracias, mi amor. And this one with the right on. I tell you, it's another episode 4, Speaking Legally. We'll be back again next Wednesday at 4 p.m. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Hey, Winsome, appreciate you. And be safe and stay sheltered in. Bye for now. It's Dr. Stacy signing off.